piano lesson now had to be censored too.
I was very young. I was 10 years old and my piano teacher gave me Mendelssohn's Lieder ohne Worte, and she told me, if you practice it, please close your window because the music is forbidden. Of course, it was for me very interesting discovery. As a young man, you are always looking for something that's forbidden more than a normal thing. And she told me immediately, if you play it, you have to close your window.
Aryan Germans were no longer permitted the universal language of the songs without words. There was some resistance from officials charged with depriving Germany of one of its favourite composers.
After a long and quite unpleasant discussion with Dr. Goebbels, I put forward a formal application for Mendelssohn's violin concerto to be performed in concert halls. I ask you to support this proposal with the Führer, who will not see me. Regarding the Parte women's magazine, I would draw your attention to a song by F. Mendelssohn-Bartholdy, which is printed on a prominent place on the page. Please make sure that this does not happen again.
But eventually, Felix Mendelssohn became definitively Jewish.
Mendelssohn was, of course, the perfect mainstay of this repertoire because he was a classic as far as the Germans were concerned, but he was, of course, a Jew in the eyes of the Jewish Cultural League, so he was absolutely mainstay of the repertoire.
He was performed in 60 concerts. I mean, he took the lead. Practically all of his great compositions were played in the Kulturbund.
Until now, Elijah had been loved by both Jews and Aryans. But as their situation became more desperate, the Jews of Germany clung to it as their own. It was performed in the Neue Synagogue in Berlin in 1937 to a packed and threadbare audience. The doors and windows were shut tight, lest the music seep out and pollute the clean German air outside. So much for Felix's hope that the work would bring Jews and Christians together. And when the Jews were sent to the camps, they took Mendelssohn with them. This propaganda film, made by the Nazis about the concentration camp at Theresienstadt, begins with Elijah. It was the last music many of them heard before they were transported to Auschwitz. But Elijah lived on outside Germany. The Jews who escaped took it with them and adapted it for their Sabbath service. Meanwhile, my cousins who remained in Germany were themselves at risk from transportation to camps. They had to make a distance, as Felix had done, from their Jewish ancestry. It became harder and harder as the Nazis resorted to more and more bizarre techniques to recognize a Jew.
This is a racial profile being conducted at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Berlin, measuring in great detail how the skull is shaped. They had charts of different eye color, hair color, different features like of the nose or the ears as to exactly what the particular physical configurations were.
There was some chronology theory about if you had the right kind of earlobes, then you were Aryan, and if you had the wrong kind of earlobes, you could be Jewish.
Fingerprints, footprints, body posture. If you had rounded shoulders, for example, if you were slouching, that was taken as a racial characteristics.
Do you have Jewish earlobes?
I'm not sure. I don't think anyone's ever looked at my earlobes with sufficient attention.
Among the many docs submitted were a series of photographs showing the family's left earlobes. Luckily, they were also all blue-eyed blondes. The Nazis had found all these ways to get rid of human pollution in the national body, but there was still musical pollution deep in the very heart of German national life.
Bless thee, bottom, bless thee, thou art translated. I see their knavery, this is to make an ass of me, to fright me if they could. But I will not stir from this place, do what they can. I will walk up and down here, and I will sing, that they shall hear I am not afraid.
A Midsummer Night's Dream became a huge problem when Felix was rebranded as a Jew. His music fitted Germany's favourite play so well that they had become inseparable. In the propaganda film about the camp at Theresa, the producers tried to persuade their audience that Mendelssohn's music belonged with the Jews by using it to illustrate the happy lives of the camp's inmates. The music was less easily confined than the Jews.
Shakespeare was almost an honorary German. His plays were performed in every provincial theatre, and Midsummer Night's Dream was one of the most popular. And of course, all these theatres were faced with a tremendous problem. How could they perform this very popular play without Mendelssohn's work? Well, the answer was that they had to replace it, and there were indeed 44 different attempts to supplant Mendelssohn's work.
While the Germans tried to bury Felix's music, my family were still trying to bring to light the identity of the orphan Fanny. And then, at some point, Ria's mother had her brainwave.
First, they tried to get documents, and later on they were aware it was better not to have documents about the birth of that funny orphan.
Why?
Why? Because as long as you can't prove she was really an outcoming of a Jew, the case could not be solved.
Lotte realized that the important thing was not to come to a decision, but to draw it out as long as possible, so that hopefully it would never be decided against them.
They just had to hang on until the end of the war. Even with Germany approaching oblivion, the Nazis were determined to write Mendelssohn out of history.
And indeed, one of the last attempts to replace this incidental music was a proposed production by the composer Carl Orff. I think the amazing thing is that, you know, this whole process of replacing Mendelssohn's music went on until total war in 1944.
Felix Mendelssohn had been rejected by those who had loved him and turned into a monster. The story of the play had become his story. The family's suspense was brought to an end in 1944 when the Reich Genealogical Office was bombed. All the papers were lost and the case was abandoned. The war ended. Ria and the others were safe, but their fear and confusion remained. They had no idea of the drama that had taken such a toll on their mother.
We didn't know why she was always in bad humor all the time. My mother really lost her way and looked very much if she came out of a concentration camp. And only in the last years of Nazism we understood it better.
And as it turns out, Mendelssohn was too beloved in Germany to disappear forever. 100 years after Wagner's first attack, Mendelssohn's music returned. Shortly after the war, a concert was held in a makeshift hall in Cecile's hometown of Erlangen.
And then all of a sudden, the conductor said, "And now we play von Mendelssohn-Bartholdy,